the three of us are going to explore one of the most important frontiers of business. And it's one that a lot of times in these conferences we don't talk a lot about, but I would argue that it impacts everyone in the room. And that's how AI is recoding manufacturing and supply chains. And for pharma and food companies, the stakes are pretty high. Patient safety, food security, global resilience, and of course, profitability are impacted. So AI-driven analytics and computer vision have been boosting efficiency in factories and logistics for some time. And for example, AI-based quality control can improve defect detection by 15 to 30%. Predictive maintenance can cut unplanned downtime by 20 to 40%. And yield improvements by just even a few percentage points in these businesses create significant revenue opportunities. Companies even talk about autonomous supply chain agents to manage orders, logistics, and inventory. And at the same time, we've heard this earlier today, executives warn that trust, regulations, and integration remains hurdles. So if an AI recommendation can't explain itself, managers are reluctant to act on it, and it's easy to get lost in vendor hype. So as we've heard throughout the day, major investments underlying AI's strategic role suggest deep changes ahead. And today, these senior leaders from Gilead Sciences and McCain Foods are organizations that are pioneering this shift. And over the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to explore what the factory of the future means, where causal, agentic, and physical AI converge to transform how we design, run, and recode manufacturing and supply chain operations. So as I ask the first question here, guys, just tell a little about yourself, a little bit about your company. But Harmik, I'm going to start with you. With the exception of perhaps some select semiconductor facilities, and it's a very small selection, today's plants are automated but not autonomous. The vision is systems that sense, decide, and act, often without human intervention. So the question to you is, what does moving from automation to autonomy look like in your world? And which part of manufacturing or supply chain is closest to crossing that threshold in the next 3 to 5 years? And where do you see regulatory hurdles in your industry?
Sure. Thanks, Chris. Hi, everybody. Harmik Begi with Gilead Sciences. Gilead is a biopharmaceutical company based in Foster City up in the Bay Area. We have manufacturing facilities in different parts of California and the world. The business of discovering, developing, and delivering therapeutics, different areas, oncology, virology, liver disease, as examples for mostly rare diseases in terms of critical patient care. My area of focus is development and manufacturing. So within the value chain of research to commercialization, I support the area with IT teams that look after process development, regulatory CMC area, manufacturing, supply chain, and quality. So the question around moving from automated to autonomy. So historically, our manufacturing facilities in pharma have been actually fairly automated. There are pockets of autonomous unit operations that run within a process train in a manufacturing plant. A good example is small molecule, oral solid pill, if you will, process trains that run different parts of the manufacturing process. The hurdle for us in terms of going full autonomous in an entire end-to-end sense is the regulatory compliance and meeting the quality requirements. FDA has good manufacturing practices, I should say, regulatory bodies, not just FDA, but FDA in US, that we need to follow to the letter, which means not only we need to manufacture the product, but we need to actually collect a lot of data and provide evidence of compliance against the rule book. So that has to happen continuously. Every batch produced, every intermediate produced, every vial, every product we produce has to go through that. Historically, it's a lot of paper-based process. Now it's all digitized, but the decision-making around releasing the products and the key changes you make are still human-based. So autonomy could be mostly around monitoring, maybe recommending, predicting and recommending, but not making the quality decision to release the product. So that's sort of the core manufacturing space. I think as you get away from the core manufacturing process and you look at supporting processes in supply chain, maintenance, surrounding core manufacturing, I think a lot more opportunities, a lot more automation is happening. Supply chain planning, integrated planning of demand and supply, scenario planning in supply chain. Current AI is really making inroads in the industry. Predictive maintenance is a classic one as well. That's nearly becoming autonomous minus the actual physical work, meaning you predict the useful life and probability of failure of an asset, you automatically generate a work order and send it to a technician. So that's sort of the closed loop approach.
Yep.
So I'll stop there.
Yeah, sure. Jay, let me turn to you. Causal AI explains why. Agentic AI is goal-oriented and can act on its own, and physical AI, robotics and embodied intelligence, brings decisions into the physical world. So in your view, how do you see causal, agentic, and physical AI converging in your operations or in the industries in general? And what new opportunities and risks emerge when machines don't just automate tasks, but reason, act, and execute physically?
You gave me the complex one.
Yeah, I did.
For us, agentic AI and a lot of the work we're talking about today is a decorator around existing automation in our facilities. The business case for us, just if we talk about it, it's been commented on a couple of the conversations, is we have a pretty soft market at the moment. People are going to quick service retail less and less. So I come from McCain Foods. We make 1 in every 4 French fries in the world, which is an awesome place to work and a great place to take a break. But one of the important things for us is how do we succeed in this softer market? And so that's really reducing costs so AI for us is a way to reduce probably about 3 to 5% of our cost of goods sold. That doesn't mean that an AI project might not do a lot, like Chris was mentioning. We have examples in freezing and frying where we've been able to create 50% less defects or less downtime, but the actual impact to our cost of goods sold as an aspiration is about 3 to 5%. And when we think about manufacturing, our goal in better manufacturing is to look at metrics like speed, waste, and delay. And traditional manufacturers will record sub-second data, usually of all their motors, pumps, and fans, and then they'll compute the speed, waste, and delay. And if there's a problem, a deviation, they'll send it to an operator station, or they'll send an email, or they'll run an alarm in the industry. And what we want to do is figure out how do we plug an agent into that process. And for our facilities, what we do, so all of that data is stored in the OT environment. For many of you who are here, that's probably a foreign concept, but it's firewalled from the IT environment that we're all using mostly in our companies today. And in that OT environment, we run a flight recorder, which stores everything down to the second. And in that flight recorder is really where we need agentic AI to sit, which has a unique challenge that we'll talk about probably in a future question. And so what we do instead is, on our way of computing the speed, waste, and delay, we use an event-driven process to say, input a rule, and if you exceed a rule or there's a problem with a rule, send it to a REST request to an API. And that API is our agent, right? It's often written in Python. It'll get a request that'll say, speed is too low. And the first thing the agent has to do, because agent is quite dumb, is figure out what to do with this information. And it says, if it's speed, what affects speed? And for most manufacturers, they'll run a contextualization layer just above their historian, often called an asset framework. And that is a set of XML files that links one piece of equipment to everything else, much like you'd have a bill of materials in SAP. And so the first thing the agent does is read that bill of materials, the XML file, and say, give me the last hour of data for all the things that exist in this XML file that relate to whatever I was just told. And after that, it's assembling effectively a data frame. And then it's just LLM accelerated data science, We are pushing it back out to the LLM. We're saying build a random forest model. Give me the item or the dimension that has the highest impact on the variability. After that, I'm saying go run a causal model. For Python, that would be the do-why library, and then give me a causal answer back. Where we're probably pushing it even further is what Chris was saying, how do you get into the physical AI of taking that causal response and doing something? You can ask the LLM to give you a JSON response that's really easy to parse, and when you take that, you now have to push it back down to a physical machine. We actually push it back through this flight recorder, and then we read that inside of our machines, our motors, pumps, and fans. There's a lot of ways to do it, but that's how we're aggregating AI into a process that already exists. And we can comment on more in the future.
Yeah. Thanks, Jay. Jay just schooled us all in the right way to think about how to get manufacturing data out of a complex manufacturing environment. And make use of it. So that was a great description, Jay. So thank you.
By the way, very, very similar
Yeah.
pattern in pharma manufacturing.
That's right.
Sure.
That's
very
right.
applicable.
But I think it was a good explanation for people that don't live in this world. So very, very nice. So staying with you, Jay, just I'd like you to comment a little bit about digital twins, predictive analytics, adaptive control. They're kind of here. But when you think about the factory of the future and it being modular, self-optimizing, business model changing, how are you envisioning the factory of the future, either at McCain or just more broadly for industrial manufacturers? Is this an evolution of kind of today's environment, or does it represent a complete redesign of how we manufacture and distribute value?
It's going to feel incremental, and this answer is not particularly sexy, but for most manufacturers, they follow an automation pyramid. So you start with a set of controls at the bottom. So if I'm asking for a flow rate, I modify a valve. That would be an example of a distributed control system that sits at the bottom of the pyramid. And as you move up the pyramid, the goal is to have fewer things you're setting and a longer time scale. So basically, you're reducing the dimensionality and you're increasing the time scale. Most manufacturers in heavy industry still sit at that bottom layer, which came out probably, keep me honest, in the 70s, 80s.
Yeah, 80s.
And that's probably where 85% of heavy industry sits, in large part because they don't have a lot of either margin pressure, or they don't have the CapEx that they can invest in it, or they have a dearth of available electrical engineers to even do the next step. But as you move up, especially in pharma and places that have the capital to put in, as you move up this automation pyramid, you start to have the opportunities to start putting in the factory of the future items. So first would be automated process control, which starts to tamp down on variability and allows you to move the machine dynamically without the input of operators. That would emerge probably in the late 90s, early 2000s, coming out of oil and gas. And now you have the ability to do even longer term simulations. This would be things like discrete event simulation that you can plug in. You can start to bring in the transactional data from your ERP system that's giving you that frozen 2 or 4 week plan. And that integration from the temporal nature of manufacturing to the transactional nature of your ERP system, that is where the factory of the future sits. Because so many organizations rely on either Excel sheets or even linear solvers such as SAP APO to do a lot of the math in the middle. But there's a huge amount that you can squeeze there. And when you can reduce the lead time and you can reduce the amount of churn you have in your production plan, there's a fair bit to gain.
Yeah. Awesome. So Harmik, let's switch gears a little bit. We've heard a little bit of this theme. Technology alone is not going to drive the shift, as we know. Autonomy, or the path to autonomy, is going to kind of recode the roles that people play, the skills that they have, and leadership in general. So talk to me a little bit about how you're thinking about preparing the workforce and your leadership teams for what's coming in the factory of the future, and what cultural or organizational barriers are proving more challenging than the technical ones.
Yeah, I'll start at the last point. The big cultural barrier is how you deal with the regulatory compliance piece. So pharma typically has quality organizations that are basically safeguarding the company to make sure we're compliant in everything we do in manufacturing and in particular. So Bringing more automation and AI into play and using less and less of human decision making is a big barrier, and partly because the regulatory agencies themselves have not thought about how to use AI. Now, FDA recently provided some AI guidance, which is quite interesting. When you look at it, they want you to do quite a bit with your AI models to demonstrate that they have repeatable patterns. They have guidance around post-production drifts and all the things we've been talking about earlier. And imagine having to do risk-based, what we call validation, and look at all the sort of the bad behaviors of a model, bad outputs, and how it will impact product quality. So you got to trace all possibilities and then test all of that. So it's quite a bit of a burden around that, and that creates a lot of anxiety. I call it compliance anxiety in the culture, and therefore people are apprehensive about going too far into autonomy or generative AI, particularly in manufacturing, where it's really difficult. Now, beyond that, I think it's been discussed. Leadership change management from the top down. We've started with Copilot in Microsoft and actually have micro learning sessions with CEO and staff. Let's build an agent. Get your laptop out and let's build an agent to do something simple. And we're starting that at the top, and so our leaders could understand, what's possible, but also they could start to see how it's different. Ways of working will be so much different, and potentially our workflows will be so much different. Again, lots was discussed today, and certainly then from a bottom up, we need to get everyone to be skilled and get their hands dirty with AI, and. But I think the culture piece is really the biggest barrier. Did I cover all the points?
Yeah. I'm going to ask Jay, if you have anything to add on kind of the workforce and the role, skills, leadership, but also when we talk about resilience and responsibility with AI. Autonomous operations can kind of strengthen that resilience by anticipating disruptions, rerouting supply, minimizing waste. But it also raises critical questions around trust and accountability. So where do you kind of draw the line, and how do you ensure safety, resiliency, responsibility when you're deploying AI agents? So kind of weave in an answer around that with the workforce.
On the workforce in manufacturing, just to start with that, we see, like many people have commented, a bifurcation in the folks in the middle who are doing a lot of stare and compare work just to make sure things are matching up. That work is starting to go away. Instead, we are upskilling them into more of a plant management and an understanding of how the business works. And then there's the piece of folks who are on the edge of maybe being managers in electrical engineering that we actually want to upskill in electrical engineering and mechanical engineering. Those trades are not going away. So you end up with a little bit of this gap. It's not too dissimilar from a gap that you saw in oil and gas and chemicals, again, emerging in the late 2000s when APC and a lot of other automation tools were adopted. So for us, it's a well-worn path. We just need to follow it. And I think AI and this type of work is just accelerating it. On the resilience and most importantly, the security, this is a challenge for us because we operate in this OT environment, which is not built to be secure by design. It's often just cut off from the internet through a north-south firewall. So we have to make a little bit of a different approach than some of the folks have been describing here of just being able to ping an LLM in the cloud. Instead, we embed SLMs into VMs that are sitting inside of our OT environment. So we'll download the model weights from Hugging Face. The Microsoft Phi series of models have been really popular for us. We'll put an inference layer on top of it, and then we'll be able to hit it via an API for all of the calls we're making inside of the OT environment. It's been great to see a lot of the progress. We're now up to running close to 20 billion parameter models at the edge with pretty low compute resources. We expect to be able to continue to increase that, especially as quantization becomes more and more popular. So that's the first piece of making sure that we don't have to access the internet and we can still embrace the strategies that everybody here is describing. The second piece from a control standpoint is how do you integrate something that's probabilistic inside of a control strategy that's mostly deterministic? which is a big challenge. So the way we've done this is the way you integrate weather data to controls in the past, which is as a disturbance variable. So you write the loops as if it's perfect, and a disturbance variable such as the humidity or the dew point is allowed to perturb the existing loop. So it can always fall back to the existing control if there's a problem. A lot of people don't write loops that way. It's called inner-outer loops or cascade control loops in the industry. And that's a piece where we'll have to educate a lot of electrical engineers to look at things a little bit more resiliently. And then the final piece is integration with existing systems. Harmick mentioned sending things to SAP for maintenance planning. We need the organization to feel comfortable that they're going to get more responses, more things that have defects in motors, pumps, and fans, and therefore they're going to convert a lot more notifications into work orders and how to process that. That's a little bit of a different type of resilience, but an important piece that we're working through in our organization.
Okay.
Yeah, can I just add in
Sure.
a piece there? I think for us, for both of us, I think we need to think about resiliency also in terms of disaster recovery. What happens if your plant loses connectivity to the internet? You still need to run product, supply the patient. So imagine with everything we're talking about, most of the stuff is in the cloud, models are running, and they have to come up and down, as you said. But we even need to think about that. How does a plant run in a very autonomous digital way, but still not be reliant for a long time, for some time to the outside world? So, those are some of the nuances in our case and probably yours in manufacturing you have to think about. And then the redundant design of your systems, both hardware and software, and your cloud and, your wide area network, all of those have to be accounted for in having resiliency in supply.
Yeah, there's this common archetype of sending everything to the cloud, doing the analysis with a model, sending it back down to a dashboard. Operator reads the dashboard and does something about it. But one, operators have way too many dashboards to look at, so that's problem number one. And two, getting things back from the IT to OT interface, especially if you have in a remote area. We build our factories next to the farms. Sometimes we have to build the road to get there. Is quite challenging. And so that's why this embedded control, which is very different than the conversations we've been having today, this embedded control is so critical, and it harkens back to, again, a lot of the work that came out of the late 2000s.
Yeah. I think this resiliency and recovery capability in manufacturing, for the reasons you guys outlined, as well as the cybersecurity kind of attacks, some of these things would be considered critical infrastructure. I deal with critical infrastructure all the time with wastewater and power and all that kind of stuff. Resiliency and recovery in our world is, kind of top of mind always. All right.
I didn't mention French fries is critical.
They're critical to me. Let's finish up with the lightning round. So I'm just looking for fast, kind of one-word answers. So I'll just go to both of you with these questions. So yes or no, would you trust a fully autonomous plant to run without human intervention today and then, let's say, 3 years from now? Harmick?
No, not today, and probably not 3 years from now. Be more augmentation.
Yeah.
I would say I do trust it. We run a lot of our cold supply chain fully autonomous with low oxygen content and all blacked out. So I do trust it.
Okay, I know Harmick's answer to this next one, but I'll ask it anyhow. One word: augmentation, automation, or autonomy. Which one describes your future state aspirations?
Automation with augmentation, not autonomy.
A mix of automation and autonomy for us.
Okay. One word: yield or speed. Which ones matters most for AI in your plants?
I'll start. So it actually some modality dependency for us. So if it's biologics manufacturing, yield is important because there's significant value in yield. If it's cell therapy, speed to patient is very important. We have 21 days from personalized, getting the cells from the patient back to the patient once it's been altered with the medication. So both are important depending on where we play.
Probably yield for us, but speed is the easiest.
Yeah. Okay, with true or false, within 5 years, agentic AI will routinely adjust supply chain flows without human approval.
Yes.
True.
Yeah. One word. What's the single biggest barrier to your vision of the factory of the future?
Regulatory compliance posture of pharma and the regulatory bodies themselves adopting AI in that same vein.
People.
People. Yeah. People. All right. Data or culture, which is harder to transform?
Culture.
I'm going to say data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Last one. Short response. What existing or emerging AI use case or technology are you most excited about?
I think a couple of areas, just this full end-to-end supply chain orchestration. We talked about doing integrated demand supply planning and connecting that to manufacturing, sort of the above site environment connected to individual sites or a network of sites and updating, site plans for their schedules is something that would have a huge impact.
Yeah, for us, I think we're excited that all this craze around AI has made a bunch of orthogonal things a lot faster. So we're using a lot more computational fluid dynamics and so forth that's screaming fast because NVIDIA loves it.
Yeah.
And that's where we're excited.
All right. Well, that's all I got. You guys are off the hook. I thank you for participating, and you guys have interesting roles. And I think we'll take questions at lunch, and we'll all be available for lunch. So thank you.